Hi, everybody, and welcome to our podcast, Diary of a CIO. I am Sarah Paulson from Fruition Consulting, and I'm delighted to welcome our guest today, Mark Joyce. Welcome, Mark.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's great to be on here.
No worries. So, a very quick intro to Mark's career. Mark is a distinguished technology leader with a really rich background working for some amazing global brands, Yahoo, the BBC, Sky Bets, who are obviously part of the Flutter Group. So Mark's got an extensive background spanning various different domains and industries, which really showcases how versatile and adaptable Mark is to navigating different industries. More recently, Mark's taken on some interim assignments and has completed sort of transformational CTO roles for companies such as Purple Bricks, Stripe, and X Design. Outside of work, Mark has a 3-year-old son called Jensen and spends lots of time out walking in the countryside, lives rurally, and is also very entrepreneurial and does a bit of property development on the side when he gets time. So very quick intro, and yeah, welcome again. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Sarah. I think you've been really kind to me there, but it makes me sound more interesting than what I am. So, but thank you.
No worries at all. So we'll delve straight in with some questions, Mark, if that's all right. And I always ask this question. I think it's a really good opener and an insight to the guests. So my first question is, when did you know you wanted to be a CTO? Was it your childhood dream?
Yeah, no, not something from 5 years old, unfortunately. Yeah, but it's a really good question. I don't think there was a sort of an early moment in my career. I think the two sort of guiding principles around my career have been work with the best people you can and work on the best problems or opportunities that you can find, and I think
Yeah.
the rest of it then starts to come together. And I've been so lucky to be able to work with some amazing people on some fantastic projects or companies or stages in the life cycle of those companies. I
Yeah.
think the CTO moment probably came around, I've tried to, having those guiding principles, I've ended up doing a lot of different things, different areas. And I think it's probably Skybet, the technology director role, was a bit of a catalyst. It was sort of the
Yeah.
equivalent of the CTO role. There's sort of 250 to 300 people. And, we were
Wow.
serving millions and millions of customers, at weekends and things like that. And I think I'd done different things. My role was progressing a bit more towards strategy, probably towards COO routes because of the acquisitions that Flutter was making as Skybet had gone through. And the tech director role came up at Skybet, and I thought, you know what, I really want to get close to the technology again. And when I was in that role, I had this realization of that. I just really love that. I love being close to the technology. I absolutely love shipping products to millions of customers that you're making decisions on that influence them, that either entertain their lives, help their lives, make it better. And I think being CTO, you get to work across all the different areas: architecture, engineering, service operations, delivery. And it's so interesting because I can be in one meeting about architecture and platform strategy, but then I can go into a meeting with operations talking about an issue or an incident we've had, yesterday, overnight, today, that we need to solve. And so it just gives you such a diverse day, week, month, year, because you're just constantly spanning across them. So I think I really like that. It was that variety. Just I thought, this is great. How could I ever get bored?
Right.
Of that role, basically. So
Right.
that's kind of when it happened. I think was like, this is the path for me, rather than the business or commercial or operational side of things.
So it was more the breadth of the role rather than you were keen to progress your career that
Yeah,
kind of made you
yeah,
develop
definitely.
into that position.
Yeah, definitely. I think I always like making progress, but it's never, some of my career moves have been sideways moves, because I think
Right.
sometimes you have to follow what you're interested in over the career title. I think I've been very fortunate to progress in the way that I have done, but I've always followed, well, that's really interesting. I'd like to go and focus on this because I think I'll learn something and I'll add some value. So I think CTO, you kind of get there, but what's great is now is, every CTO role is different. So you're learning,
Mhm.
and some things you come with lots of experience, and some things you're really learning from day one, different sector, and that keeps it really interesting for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess once you get to that level, I think it's got to be accepted that a C-level role is going to be demanding. How do you balance professional and personal demands? How do you manage that?
Yeah, it's never easy, is it? I think, we were just talking then about lunch, it's often the one that gets sacrificed, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really difficult, but it's obviously really important. I'm a big believer that tying your personal life and work life together isn't the worst thing, because I think if you're passionate about what you're doing, then it's not this thing that you sort of compartmentalize and go, thank gosh, thank God the week's done, or right, I'm glad that's over now, because I think it's important you enjoy what you're doing, but you do have to have the separation. And I think the more senior I've got, the more important that's become to me, especially having sort of my first child 3 years ago. The importance of being present when I'm around him, is so important to me.
Mm.
And so just small things really around. I'll say to my team, 5 till 7. I'm not really contactable unless it's an absolute emergency. I think
Right.
sometimes running platforms and products, it's you've got to be reachable. But I'll try
Yeah.
not to be working then, so I can have that quality time with him. I never used to have a separate work phone, but it's something that I do now,
Oh,
just because.
really?
Yeah, it's something, we're obviously so connected, aren't we, all the time? And I just do that just because, yeah, just when I'm having my downtime, I'm terrible for reading my messages because I'm interested in everything we're doing. It's not
Yeah.
like, oh God, I've got to read my emails now or and things.
Yeah.
So and I'm terrible for it. So I just kind of separate it. Forces me to separate the two
Yeah.
things.
So putting those firm boundaries in place has been kind of key to allow you to have that
Yeah,
balance. So
yeah. I
those
think
messages to your team, or that self-control with the
yeah.
phone. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so important because I think my teamwork then will equally respond to me with their boundaries, and it
Right.
makes them feel safe too. And I used to not be like that. I would just be connected constantly, and messaging at different times. And I realized that actually, whilst that might be okay for me, for my team, it wasn't having a good effect on them. But they didn't feel like they could say to me, Mark, I don't want to work in the evening, or I don't want to be reachable at the weekends and things like that. And so it was a really important lesson for me to learn that by setting my boundaries, it empowered my team to do the same. And that's a much more healthy work environment and work balance for myself and for my team, which is so important.
Obviously, you talked about your tenure at Sky Bet, which obviously was quite transformational for your career. Has there been any kind of particular individual that's really kind of influenced and inspired your career and kind of changed the direction? Had people that have stood out?
Yeah, definitely. I think, there's almost too many to name. I think what made Sky Bet an incredible organization was there was just so many talented people. And that
Yeah.
wasn't just senior people. I think it was sort of twofold. I used to get, and I still do get inspired by the people I'm just working with day to day. It doesn't matter what sort of role or where they are in the sort of hierarchy and things. That really inspires me. Seeing people that, sometimes you come across people who are so passionate about the roles, or they're just so good at what they do. That's really inspiring for me. It always makes me want to be better, be a better leader. But I think there's a couple of people definitely. So I think Rick Barker was I call him like a catalyst individual for me
Right.
for my career. He just really believed in me, and I joined Skybet as a contractor, and he just was like, Mark, you need to go into leadership. And I just loved contributing. I just wanted to add value, and work with the teams and be close to the work and the detail. And he sort of really, really pushed me, and I loved it. It was the right thing, and he saw that in me and really backed me and advocated for me. Connor Grant, who was the CEO of Flutter, and he was just, again, just an incredible leader. He really led authentically, one of the most authentic leaders I ever met, and he taught me that your values shouldn't change in work. If you lead with your values, leadership it's easier, it's more natural. Your decisions will come easier to you because you'll make them with your values and not something you think you have to be. And that was incredible. And then Beth Gildersleeve, she was my last boss at Skybet, and she is just one of the best leaders and one of the best people that create such a diverse and inclusive environment. She just really made people feel like they could fully bring themselves to work, and that was so inspiring for me. And Andy Burton, who you had on your podcast, he
Yeah.
mentored
Yeah.
me. He mentored me. So when I went into my tech director role at Skybet, he'd left Skybet, but he offered to mentor me, and that
Oh,
was
really?
yeah, and it was
Yeah.
invaluable for me stepping into that bigger leadership role. And he was, yeah, so yeah, just a lot of people.
Yeah. Amazing. And interesting talking about having an external mentor, because I guess that's a great opportunity to have a mentor who actually has been in your shoes and worked in that culture and environment and technology domain and understands everything about the business, to be able to then provide, I guess, guidance and advice to you. And how did you seek out that, or was that kind of something that was arranged for you?
Yeah, so I've had mentors throughout my career because I just think they're so important. My advice to anybody that, at any point in their career is to have a mentor. And so it was Amanda Bellwood who was she was the people director, and she
Yeah,
said
I remember
when I
her.
joined that role, she was part of the interview process, and she said to me, Mark, I think Andy would be an amazing mentor for you.
Yeah,
And she sort of, I'd worked with Andy a lot, but and she sort of made that connection, and she reached out to him, and he was like, yeah, brilliant, and I think it's something Andy really enjoys. I've had mentors. I have one now too, CIO at Very Group, again an external, Matt, who's an incredible leader. I just think it's so valuable. Um, and there's a really great saying, I think it's Tony Robbins, but it's like success leaves clues. And so when you can learn from people who've been through the challenges or the growth that you're going through, why do that from scratch when you can learn from
yeah,
people who, and they and mentors tend to love giving out their advice because they've had someone that helped them too. Um, I've had coaches, professional coaches, a lady called Susanna Prout, who's been such an influential person on me. And I think the difference between a mentor and a coach is the coach, they really hold the mirror up on you, the
yeah,
sort of beliefs that drive you. I'm sure you've probably had the same experience, the beliefs that drive you, that you think drive you, and you think this is who I am and what I can do. And then they kind of really hold that mirror up and challenge you to, why do you believe that? How do you break through that? And I think that's, again, yeah, something invaluable for development.
yeah. And it's very easy to forget about your own personal development when you're in such a demanding role.
Yeah.
But I think, what you said there, that success leaves clues, is actually, why wouldn't you seek help from someone that's been in your shoes to help make life easier? Do
Yeah.
do you provide that mentoring to anybody yourself?
Yeah, so I have done in the past. It's not something I'm doing just at this point. A lot of the role that I'm doing at the moment, the sort of fractional CTO role at Preventex, a part of that is to mentor the team, I guess,
Okay.
through one-to-ones, conversations. It's great to do, and then I've done more sort of people, not in the companies I'm working in, because it's such a great thing to be able to do. Like it's so fulfilling to be able to support someone in their career, especially when you've had that support too. Selfishly, you learn yourself. It's just great to talk to people with different
Yeah.
challenges in different organizations. You just learn so much yourself through that too. And more often though, you get to connect with just great people and interesting
Yeah.
people, and that's a really nice experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I've done it for the first time this year, and I've been mentoring two people from our industry, and just the kind of the gratitude that they've shown me. And it's 45 minutes of my time,
Yeah,
every month or whatever, has just been unreal. And you just don't realize the impact that you can have on somebody just by sitting down, having a coffee, and giving
yeah,
them, sharing some of your experiences and how valuable that can be. So
yeah.
I've really enjoyed it and like to do more of it.
It's yeah, it's so valuable to that person, I imagine. To you,
Yeah.
it's just your time, isn't it?
Yeah, which is valuable, but
Which is really exactly, but it's,
yeah.
yeah. And I mentored once. We did this thing where we mentored somebody out the grad scheme, and
Okay.
and that was for me, it was, I don't want to say challenging in that they were challenging. It was challenging for me, somebody so early on in their career. What advice do you give them that's going to be really impactful for them? And it was great. And just seeing then fresh perspective in Skybet there on the culture, the way we did things, and because they were coming to it with no previous experience, it was excellent. Like, some things we
Yeah.
talked about, why do decisions take so long? And you're like, yeah, great question. Why are decisions taking so long?
You
You
go
know,
away and start thinking
exactly.
about
And it was like they had
making a
this
difference.
impatience, where you can
Yeah.
get used to things a little bit. And yeah, brilliant, really valuable.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit more about Skybet, because you were there for 6 years, and I remember when Skybet landed in Leeds, and it was a force to be reckoned with. What the leadership team created there was something really unique in terms of the culture. It was dynamic, collaborative, diverse. It was the place that everybody wanted to work, and it rocked the whole kind of ecosystem for tech employers here at the time, and it's still a really amazing place to work. And I think it came down to that people really wanted to work for Sky Bet. Um, and even though, gambling can be a kind of a difficult area for some people to work in, I think people really could see the opportunity there, but the opportunity to work with really great people. What part did you play in that? And in terms of how did you motivate and empower your team members to want to keep that going and keep breeding that culture? Because sometimes organizations get too big and it can be forgotten, but that didn't happen. How did that work?
Yeah, it was a truly amazing place to work, and
Yeah,
still is a fantastic place to work. And I think in terms of my sort of contribution to that or impact, it's very hard. There were so many great people, so it's hard to call out, what success did I play in that. And I think when I joined, what was happening was we were hiring so fast. There was like, I think it was 500 to 1,200 people within 6 months, and then 2,000. It was just insane. You couldn't
yeah,
literally, somebody new sat on a desk every single week that you walked in. There'd be
yeah,
tens of people. And I think my job was, okay, we've been able to deliver, in small teams, and we've been able to implement agile, and we're doing that, and we're delivering fast, and we're innovating, but we're getting bigger, we're getting more people. So how do we scale that? How do we bring in the right processes, and keep that sort of, fast-paced delivery and all that side of things, and make sure that tech and product and delivery and operations all work together. And I think for me, it's so important for organizations when they're growing rapidly. It's easy to implement process is not hard to implement, but implementing the right processes is the really hard part that complement
yes,
the culture. And it's where you have to throw the textbook away and bring experience and an understanding of how important that culture is, and how important it is that what we're trying to achieve for our customers. And so, for me, I was very focused on the agile ways of working, all the DevOps, the scaling side of things, how we're building out our technology plans, and things like that, and doing it in a way that, that wasn't bureaucratic, didn't slow us down. And really it's about getting people to communicate and collaborate, and keeping that really together. And I think that's so important. So I think that was a lot of my role initially, was around there, and then it changed, through the acquisitions, working
yeah,
so that, again, we were delivering off the back of those, the strategic plans that, again, that the plans complemented the synergies we needed to achieve as part of those acquisitions, but also doing the right things for our customers, because that's something I think that always drove our success. Is the customer was always in the room, in the sense of our conversation, what we were doing for them, and that really drove that culture out. And then I think with Skybet, it was about scaling. And I looked after Skybet technology through COVID, and we have Grand National and all the massive events and Boxing Day, and doing that remotely. It was a new challenge for Skybet, because we'd always been together, always in the office
yeah,
5 days a week, and we believed that was our secret sauce. And I think a massive part of that was, but working remotely, we had to keep people connected. And I think it's keeping people connected, keeping colleagues connected, and connecting them to the work, so they still see the importance of that work, which I think is something that can get lost with remote working sometimes.
yeah.
Um,
Do you think we've lost that a little bit now? Like during COVID, there was such a focus on that, keeping colleagues connected and really working hard to make remote working a success from a collaboration perspective and building those solid relationships. Now it's the norm, remote hybrid working. Do you think companies still invest that amount of effort and time to keep the connection with their colleagues, or do you think that's faded a little bit?
I think it's faded a bit. Yeah, I really do. I'm a big believer in flexible working. I think that it's opened up. I think it's made the workplace more inclusive, and I think that's so important. I think it's also grown diversity. Companies before that would never hire outside the UK are suddenly hiring globally, or, across Europe. And I think that's really important for diversification. And so I think that, yeah, we put so much emphasis. I remember at Skybet, we did a big sort of initiative around ways of working, the future ways of working, and we were constantly communicating with the organisation. And I've been in many organisations now, and since then, and I think we're in this sort of non-deliberate kind of model of hybrid working, but we're not doing the things we were doing before, which were
Mhm.
sometimes we bring the teams together to connect. The messaging around mission, vision, strategy, and I think the most important thing for me is how do you connect that individual at home, be it software engineer, delivery manager, whomever it is, to the piece of work they're doing, which will be part of a larger piece, but understanding the importance and impact of that. I think that for me, when people talk to me about how do you deliver successful technology strategies, the thread I'm always looking for is how do I connect the individual back to the strategy so they know they're directly contributing on it. Otherwise, when it's a bit abstract, it doesn't mean the same, does it, to people?
No.
They don't see how they can have the impact, and I think we're not doing that great at the moment. Yeah,
Yeah.
generally.
I was chatting to someone last week about their team and how they were struggling with some of their, I guess, some of the younger generation who didn't feel that connection to the organization. And I was wondering if that was largely because, we've kind of stopped doing all those brilliant things that we did during COVID. It was quite a unique time, and that's perhaps why these individuals that aren't in the office as much are feeling that lack of connection and an emotional tie to their employer.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think it's especially if you're starting out your career, I think it's really difficult to
Yeah.
feel the sort of the culture that you're part of, but also as you and I will remember, you learn so much from others just being around them, don't you? And especially when you're starting out in your career, not just the sort of hard skills, but the soft skills. And I think for me, and this comes back to Skybet a bit, it was the behaviors that people drove, especially leadership, that told you what kind of culture you were in, and I think that's what made it such a fantastic place to work was, the leadership lived the cultures. They weren't just these sort of catchy
Mm.
marketing strap lines. You saw it in how they behaved in meetings. We used to have a saying about the behavior you walk past is the behavior you accept. And so we would call out bad behaviors if somebody was, getting a bit out of line in a meeting. We would address that there, there and then, in
Yeah.
the right way, in a respectful way.
Yeah.
But it just showed people so clearly this is the culture, and there was the fun aspect of it. People enjoyed the work they were doing. It wasn't always super serious, and I think, that you sort of. I remember my first week in the office. I remember finishing that week and going, "This is the place for me. I feel like I can thrive
Did you?
here." Yeah,
That's an
yeah. I was
amazing
like
feeling when you know
positive
you've got
people.
it right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
positive people that wanted to get stuff done. I just thought, yeah, this is for me. And I don't think you get that quite. You shut your laptop on the end of your first week now, and it's a little bit empty. It can be. So we have to
yeah,
make more effort, I think, for people.
very true, very true. Let's talk a bit about, you mentioned building diverse teams and having, I guess, broader perspectives and thinkings. Um, I think it's accepted that particularly gender diversity and inclusion is an issue in technology. We know it's getting better, and lots of organisations have made some amazing headway with it. But what steps have you taken to build out diverse teams? What are the kind of tactical things that you've seen that have worked?
We've made a lot of progress, in this area, but not enough. And I think it's something that we've got to be always conscious about, and it's something that I try to be really conscious about. And I think it's a number of things. One of them is, sometimes I've had the opportunity to construct a new team, and sometimes I'm making changes or not, and I'm always stepping back and looking at the team makeup, the diversity of the team, and that comes in all different ways, gender, race, religion, skill set, experience, thinking. I really, believe in diversity of thought, and you want different personality types and different thinking in those groups. That's how you get the best outcomes. I really believe. So I think in my direct teams, I'm always looking at that, and if I'm making changes or I'm hiring new, that really comes into it. If I am hiring new, one of the things that I think is really great is to have a really diverse interview board.
Yeah,
So really, yeah, I think that's so important. I think it's important for the candidates to see that from their first interaction with the organisation, that we don't just talk about diversity. You're experiencing it within your first interactions with us. So that's a really important thing. Anonymizing CVs, I am a big believer in that. Unconscious bias is an absolute thing. We all do it. We don't mean to do it. So I think ways that you can do that. I've literally gone through job descriptions before and changed language and worked with people on language so that it's the right kind of tone. I think in Skybet that was particularly important in a sports
Mhm.
driven organization.
Yeah.
I don't follow football. I'm literally not the sport fanatic. So yeah, I sort of understood it to some degree, but some, some of the betting organizations did have very strong sort of what they called lad cultures, and we really didn't want to be that.
Mm.
So yeah, so there's a few things there. How you talk to your team, I think language is extremely important. I something I've worked on a lot over the years is active listening. I think if you're managing a team, everybody's got different challenges personally and professionally, and you're only going to pick up on those things if you really listen. And usually people don't want to share or don't talk about their personal lives, and you only pick up the importance of those in listening to those people. And I think that for me has been a good leader, is having empathy for people, understanding their situations, and then creating an environment where if they're having a challenge at home in their personal life, you know, they should still be able to be successful at work. Maybe they're not performing as highly as you want them to be right at that point, but you invested in that person, and so I really believe then you have to support them on that journey. When we're looking at succession planning, and just generally, when you've got a larger team of, say, like at Skybet, it's 250 people plus, it becomes even more important. And so when we used to do salary updates, I used to run through, so my team would submit who they wanted salary uplifts for, and we'd always discuss that as a group. I really wanted that. So we discussed the merits of those people, and other people could chip in between my leadership team. But I used to review the data with our people team before we go into that conversation, just to check that the balance was right. So we've looked, there's been a lot of stuff on gender pay gap, and again, back to unconscious bias, some people don't even know they're doing it. But I used to look at that and look for outliers to go, well, why are we paying that person or male that, when that person's doing an equivalent in a different department or experience level. So I think you have to be really deliberate about it.
Mm.
Yeah, so they're just a few of the tactics that
Yeah.
that, that I've kind of
That-
put in place.
that's really helpful. Someone told me a long time ago that to really create a diverse team, you've got to understand how people actually feel at work, not what they say. So that kind of active
Yes.
listening part and taking time to understand your team's personal challenges and challenges at work, and kind of putting that time and effort in is absolutely key. I guess moving on, your last few roles have been interim assignments, which is reflective of the changes that we are seeing in the rise of the gig economy. And also, we're seeing much shorter tenure now in CTO, CIO roles. Do you think that's kind of the direction of the role, that there are almost two types of CTOs now? There's the people that come in and do the transformational work, and then there's people that come in and keep the lights on and do the BAU work. Do you think that's a driver, or have I just got that completely wrong?
No, I think it's great. I think it's a really well framed question, because I think that actually, I think after COVID a lot changed, and we recognized that we don't have to do the generic thing. You have to work 5 days a week, and you need to be in this job now for 10 years, otherwise it's not a success. And I think, what we've recognized is, like, with flexible working patterns and different hiring approaches, I think fractional and interim has become another product of those, and I think it's
Mm.
great. So some of the work I've been doing on a fractional or interim basis is working for scale up organizations that are private equity backed. They don't need a full-time CTO yet, or they
Yeah.
can't afford one, or there's a very specific challenge they're wanting to do an acquisition, or something like that. They don't have that experience in the organization, so they want to bring it in, but they don't want it to be fixed, because they know they'll do the acquisition, they'll do the integration, they'll do the transformation, and then they'll want to probably look for somebody that can run it operationally.
Mhm.
And so I think it's great, because you can pull on this community of experienced people now in this fractional and interim world, and bring them in and do advisory or transformation. I think BAU, it gets a bit of a negative tone to it, doesn't it? It feels like it's a bit boring. I certainly am probably better in the transformation space. I love coming in with loads of energy, seeking out that problem and really driving that value. And I love it when there's a goal. And I think that's what motivates me. But I have been in roles where you have to then, running something operationally, making it perform operationally, be operational efficient, have operational excellence. continue to optimize and grow something for the future, that's as hard as a transformation, and I think there are people that can be better at that, and really love doing that. So it's really good, there's roles out there that suit different people. I think from my perspective, the fractional route, I was sort of pushed down that route. My son became unwell, just under 2 years ago. And that's something that we've been working through, and so we needed to be with him more. My wife and I. My wife's in product; she's a product leader at Gymshark, and we've been so fortunate that we can still do something we absolutely love. That's a massive part of us and who we are as individuals, but also make sure we can give our son the support that he needs. And pre-COVID, I don't think that would have been possible. Maybe it would have, maybe it wouldn't, but certainly fractional wasn't really a thing. So hopefully a lot of people aren't in those circumstances.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to our podcast, Diary of a CIO. I am Sarah Paulson from Fruition Consulting, and I'm delighted to welcome our guest today, Mark Joyce. Welcome, Mark.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's great to be on here.
No worries. So a very quick intro to Mark's career. Mark is a distinguished technology leader with a really rich background working for some amazing global brands, Yahoo, the BBC, Sky Bet, who are obviously part of the Flutter Group. So Mark's got an extensive background spanning various different domains and industries, which really showcases how versatile and adaptable Mark is to navigating different industries. More recently, Mark's taken on some interim assignments and has completed sort of transformational CTO roles for companies such as Purple Bricks, Stripe, and X Design. Outside of work, Mark has a 3-year-old son called Jensen. And
but it's great, especially when we talk about diversity. I've seen my wife transition from wife to mother. She has every right to be a successful career woman, but she absolutely wants to be a great mum too. And I just think it's fantastic now that people are more open to, well, 3 days of her is really valuable, and I tell you what, you are in those 3 days, if that's what you're doing or whatever, you're so effective and efficient. Back to priorities and work-life balance. You really have to be good at prioritizing. So yeah, to answer your question, I think we will see a bit more of it in the gig economy, and I think it's just another valuable option for organizations at all different stages to be able to leverage, and it suits other people's needs at the time too, which is great.
And I can imagine that it's been quite important to invest in your personal network to be able to find out about these fractional roles, because quite often fractional roles come through recommendations and referrals. Has that been the case with you, or have you had to put some time into really making sure you've developed your network and broadened it?
Yeah, so I think when I became more senior, sort of director level, people start talking to you about networking more, and things, and you're sort of like, right, I should probably network a bit more. And I think the way I always approached this was I like making genuine connections with people, so I don't tend to target people and go, you could benefit me. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, because I think it's important to build a really valuable network. I'd recommend that to anybody in any career, or certainly if you want to go into fractional or interim assignments. But I was fortunate enough through my career that I've made a lot of good connections, and they know that I like to do a good job, and I think that definitely helps. And then when I ran into these circumstances, just through sort of communicating with people what you're up to, they've sort of gone, hey, look, actually this could work for us. Could you come help? And I've again, just been really lucky in that. I think now, as I'm leaving this current role that I've really enjoyed, it's been a great role. Fantastic CEO who's been extremely supportive of my situation and everything. You do go, crikey, I need to get out there and talk to some people and stuff. And yeah, so it is absolutely really important for sure. And I think if you can do it in a way that aligns to you authentically, that helps too. I think that really helps. And people sense that then, they do.
Yeah, and I think it's hard though, right? Because it's alien to so many people. And I think particularly post-COVID, if we think 21, 22 and 23 was such a boom period for technology, people didn't have time to do that. And actually, the economy has slowed down, and that's impacted the job market at all levels across technology. And people are now realizing, gosh, there's real value in me doing this, but people don't know how to start or where to start. I know you said it's important that you make valuable connections in terms of, you know, alignment with you as a person, but how do you do it? How do you identify those people, and what steps have you taken to build your network?
I really love meetups. I used to really enjoy them before COVID, taking part in them, contributing or just listening. I think it's such a great way of learning. And then you're immediately in a room where people just want to connect. It's not like, you know, everybody goes there thinking, right, I might meet some interesting people. And I think that's fine and really good. So I think that is a great step into networking, because everybody's just there to talk around the subject that you're all aligned and interested in. So I think that's one of the most natural, you know, ways you can do it. And then I think
Yeah.
I do see people on LinkedIn. You know, I don't LinkedIn stalk. I'm just putting it out there that, you know, I don't do that too much. But I think at the same time, you see really interesting people, and I think I'd really like to just chat to them, you know,
Yeah.
and I think just you just reach out, and some people have come back and had a fantastic response, and some people just don't reply, and that's okay. They're really busy, or they get loads of messages and things like that. I always look at things that you won't get 100% of the shots you don't take, you know, like
Yeah.
that's a guarantee, isn't it? So you might as well as just put yourself out there. So that's how I would do it. Or
Yeah.
sometimes, you know, if there's somebody you know who then knows somebody, you know, hop through those connections, connect with them
Mhm.
again. It's always nice to catch up with past colleagues or friends or people you've met,
Mhm.
and then say, look, I know you've connected this person. I think it's really interesting what they're doing. Would there be any way you could introduce us? I saw this thing the other day, and it said about North versus South, and I'm not, this is nothing against the South at all, but it was like, in the north, people are so friendly. They're like, they just want to connect you, and in the south, they'll go, "Oh, what's in it for me?" That's not been my experience. I've found Southerners to be extremely helpful and friendly, but I do think the northern tech scene, I am a big advocate for, and I think it's a very friendly place. So if you're a technologist or someone in your career that thinks, I want to connect a bit more, and I think you should, that's a, you know, find those meetups you're interested in. It's a really natural, great way of doing it.
It's a good way to start, isn't it? And I
Yeah,
think remembering at those meetups, everybody feels the same. No one knows what the right icebreaker question to ask
yeah,
is.
yeah,
You know, just
yeah,
introducing yourself, how's your day been, is just a really easy
yeah.
start. But it is daunting. It is daunting to go to those types
It
of
is.
events.
I think it's great when I met sort of Martin a couple of weeks back, and he was saying they just started one of the meetups again and stuff. And I think the recruiters are put on the networks, and it's great because what they're very good at as well is just they, because it's so natural to them to network and stuff. They get people
It's
talking, and I think
not.
that is it not? No, no. Well, you all seem natural.
It gives me heart palpitations if we run an event, thinking,
Yeah,
yeah, no, it really does. Number one, I think no one's going to show up, and how awful that would be. And number two, thinking, why would they want to talk to me? They're here to network. Why would they want to talk to me? And you've literally, we have to have a little powwow before we start, just to
yeah.
kind of, yeah, just
Oh,
to
well, it
say,
must be a
right,
good powwow because yeah, you always like, he always seems to get the conversation flowing, and I found pizza and beer tends to like really
well,
bring a
beer always
crowd in
helps.
tech. Yeah.
Absolutely. Coming on to looking ahead then, what are your top three priorities as a CTO over the next 12 months?
Doing more with less, I think, is really important. So we are in a, you know, we've been in an economical challenging time, and as a CTO, you have to be commercially aware of the either the economics you're in, could be within the company, the sector, the globe, you know, the country. I think we've all had to be cost of living. We've all become sort of economists in our own right
Yeah,
recently. So I think for me, doing more with less, and what does that mean is, you know, I think pre-COVID, you know, VC funding, you know, sort of before all that was, there was a lot more availability, and that is coming back, and that's great. But I still think we can be more efficient with that spend. You know, I think it's about really focusing on value. What value can you deliver to your customers, to your organization, to drive the value up of the product and the organization? So I think that's something, it's something I've really enjoyed being in the sort of private equity world in the last sort of, you know, 2 years, and doing the sort of the work I've been doing, because their focus is on growth. You know, there's a shorter window of investment, as you'll know, recently,
yeah.
and it's all about growth. So you have to be commercially aware and commercially empathetic to the needs of what you need to do. So I think doing more with less, driving more value, you know, building platforms for the future, really important. The next is, we can't get away from it, can we? AI. You know,
Mhm.
it wouldn't be a podcast, would it, without talking about AI?
No.
I think that there's a lot to be aware of. There's a lot of risk, but for me, I'm certainly in the adoption mindset. You can't escape it. You shouldn't escape it. I think there's so many ways to use AI, both that can benefit a customer, operational scaling or efficiency, but even just doing your day job. There's so many fantastic tools. You have to do that, in the right way as an organization. It really starts around, for me, ethics and data privacy. So if you're not a business that advocates for your customers' data, don't start getting into AI. You have to get things okay, internally
Yeah.
first of all. So I think AI is a big thing, and I think cybersecurity, you can't that's always on and a really important focus. And I think with AI coming on board, there are more intelligent tools coming with that, but the attacks are getting more intelligent, more aggressive. They scale much faster. They change in terms of their approaches much faster now, because it isn't often a person sat behind it. And so that's quite scary, but it's interesting, and you really have to have a laser focus on that. And I think back to the conversation we were having earlier, engaging, retaining flexibility, that people have now. But for me, I'm always what keeps me up at night is, are people engaged with their work? Are they passionate about what they're doing? Do they see the value that they're delivering? And how do I, in a hybrid world, communicate that link? And I think that's not something that, I think it's always on. You can't just produce a really great slide deck and go, right, that's the presentation done. That's the tech
Yeah.
strategy. You've got to keep communicating, keeping people engaged and listening to what is working and what isn't. So that'll be sort of where I'll be really focused over the next 12
Yeah.
months.
Obviously, taking big areas like AI and cybersecurity, where there's so many facets to it and so many tools and vendors and technology to support it. How do you, as a CTO, remain current and knowledgeable about these huge, massive changes that lie ahead with technology, such as AI? How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much content out there, which is, it's difficult sometimes, isn't it? And the pace in which things move at, it can sometimes be a bit overwhelming, I think, for and I think what I do is, a lot of my social media or my LinkedIn and things like that, or newsletters, I subscribe to all sorts of things like TechCrunch and Forbes and all sorts of stuff, that I really enjoy the information. It delivers it in a way to me that I like to understand it, receive it. So I do a lot of that. It's like every day I'll be looking at stuff, and even we look at this sort of recent OpenAI model that was launched really recently, just making sure that I've got content that I know every day I'm going to be sort of hit by new tech information, so I can't escape it ultimately. But it's great, I love that, and I just need little sound bites, and then I go, that's really interesting, I'm going to look at this. Courses, so I still do courses. I use things like LinkedIn Learning, Udemy,
Right.
Google offering some incredible AI resources, or Microsoft, everybody at the moment. So I do try to do that. It's hard. Time is so compressed all the time, but I think, yeah, you have to invest in your learning and development. Mentoring. So the person that's sort of mentoring me, our last conversation I had with him was around what he's doing in AI in a group like the very group, and that's amazing to learn about what they're doing at that scale. So you can be smart with sort of, I'm going to do mentoring, but I'm going to pick someone that's really in a field that I need to be in. I
Yeah.
wasn't smart with that, it just happened, and luckily they were
Yeah.
willing to share that with me. But as a bit of advice to somebody, that's a great way. Look for the experts. If somebody's really more advanced than you in an area, go and talk to them. You're going to learn so much more in an hour's conversation with them.
You seem to have a very positive outlook. Quite often that can be drained out of people when they get to the top. It's tough at the top, right? And it can
Yeah.
be lonely and challenging. But you seem to have a really sort of positive aura. Where does that come from? Is that you as a human being? Is that something you have to work on, or where does it come from?
Yeah, I think like I'm not always positive, like, because you've got to, like, sometimes my wife will tell you, I'm not, but most of the time I am. I think the way I think about things, and there's a great book on mindset, I'm sure you've seen it, like Growth and Fixed Mindset, and I know exactly what camp I want to be in, is that growth mindset, and that's something you have to really work on. I think, some of the challenges, my son's health, I've fallen into a lot of deep worry, and that spans into everything then, work and all sorts. And I just find with worry, it's an expenditure of energy that doesn't really get you anywhere. So I just figure it's better to be solution focused, better to be positive, because that tends to give you the momentum to get out of a problem. Worrying just tends to get you deeper into it. So it's something, yeah, have to work on,
Yeah.
I think as you get more senior, you deal with more problems. It can
Mhm.
feel like problem, and recognizing that that's part of the role is to solve challenges, and it's exciting, but sometimes it can be a bit negative and it can be a bit exhausting. So you've got to have your things. That's what I sort of say is, what are the things that lift you up? And you know what I'll do sometimes, and whether the teams sort of like it or not, but when I'm feeling a bit abstracted away from things and it all feels a bit C-suite executive, it's not all not fun, but some of it can be challenging, costs, cost savings and all that. I'll go and spend time with the teams. I'll go and watch product demos. Maybe I'll join some stand-ups, go and talk to the teams, because I just reconnect them with what we're doing, or I'll look at the products online. It's crazy sometimes. You don't always go on your own products. Because you talk about them every day, but you don't go and use them. And I'll go and
Yeah.
use them, and it just reconnects me with what we're doing, why we're doing it, and why it's so important. So yeah,
Amazing. Great advice. I need to take that myself sometimes.
it's
Um,
hard.
yeah, it's good to admit that you've got to work on it as well, though, because
Oh
I can
yeah,
imagine someone watching today might think, wow, what an amazing positive person. But with anything, you've got to put effort into
yeah.
to making it happen.
And when you're not feeling positive, something I've come to recognize is that it's okay. Like it's okay. Try not to dwell in it too long. But just let it happen. It's all right. You can be a bit frustrated, a bit sad, or a bit negative, and then have that time and then move on.
Yeah. Just to kind of, I guess, expand that question then, just to share with our listeners that that is really true when you've not just had lots of positive experience. What's been your biggest challenge that you've faced as a CTO, and how did you overcome it?
I think there's always a great saying, isn't it? You have to get some scars on your back before you can really call yourself a leader. And I think that, I've had to do a number of cost reduction exercises, and nobody, can say they like doing that. So we've had to do it at Skybet a couple of times, and a lot of the roles I've done recently have been about acquisitions, so really positive acquisitions or growth plans. But with that, I had to cut costs down to kind of reduce cash burn and then enable that growth, and that means people's jobs, and that is the worst part of the role for sure. And there's no decision I ever make where I disconnect myself from that, knowing that, if we're going to make those savings, people are going to lose their jobs, and that's an awful thing, and it could happen to you. So
Mm.
how do you get through that? I think I challenge myself, and say, whatever money we are spending, outside of people, it has to be returning value, because if it means we can save somebody's job, then we need to be doing it right. We need to be being efficient with our spend. The other side of it is, just understanding the implications of making people redundant. And again, not talking about the number, you've got to talk about that person and really make sure that you've done everything you can before you have to make those redundancies. The other things are, cyber attacks at Christmas. So when I took on the Skybet role, we had a major cyber attack that started, I think it was the day before Christmas Eve and lasted through to
Really?
Boxing Day.
Oh
You
dear.
know, and you talk, like, we're talking sort of tens of millions of pounds per day being processed in revenue through the platforms over that period of Christmas. So there's the jeopardy of losing money during that period is couldn't be that, other than Grand National and Cheltenham, that is the big trading season.
Right.
So having to deal with that, and also deal with that whilst you've got your family there and it's Christmas,
And
and
you want to be switching off from work
you
and
want to be there, and there's nothing you can
yeah,
do, because
yeah.
you have to be there. You can't let everybody else deal with the problem and you as a leader not be in it with them, so there's that side of things. Yeah. And just trying to think of any, there's I mean there's all sorts of things. I've had really bad service runs before where sites just keep going down. I think that's really hard. I think the smaller problems, for example, like a cyber attack, you're usually dealing with those quickly.
Yeah.
If it's 3 days or longer, it's you're really into a bad territory, but you're dealing with them really quick. So you go in, you get that solved. When you're having a bad service period that can last for months, your sites are going down repeatedly. You're trying to fix forward. I've had that. I've had that when I've joined roles, and you're trying to, you've just got this job, and you're working with a CEO, and you're trying to build your confidence and credibility, but you can't keep your sights up. And that's really difficult. But I think that's where
Yeah,
you show your true colors,
yeah,
you know, how you lead through that with integrity, how you deal with the teams, how you maintain the right level of pressure, but also support people to get through that because they're experiencing that too. And they care just as much as you do. And then what you do afterwards, the learning, the transparency around learning, and how you bring that, you know, to say this is how we're going to learn from this and do better next time, and again reflect on yourself in that process. So yeah, plenty. I could keep going on with the list of challenges. It's probably more than there are good, but
well, no, but I think what's important is, you know, what you've learned from those challenges, and that's probably given people some really good, valuable advice today that are perhaps, you know, aspiring CTOs, that, you know,
yeah,
that reflection and it is so important.
yeah,
Oh, you seem like you've got some, you know, really good balance in your career, and you've had some good times, but testing times as well. So it's been, you know, it's been a really interesting conversation. I've got one last question, which is actually from one of our previous guests, and we're going to talk about AI, which it seems to be a very common topic of conversation. But specifically with the advancement in AI, comes ethical and, I guess, social responsibility. How do you, and obviously it's going to be different for every organization. It's quite interesting. I was talking to the guy from the AA, and the implications on AI going wrong in the AA is actually life or death. And it's obviously very different to what could happen at Sky Bet, for example. But how do you address the ethical dilemmas related to AI, automation, and data ethics as a CTO?
it really does start with organizational culture. So I think how you know treat your customers already is extremely important, as I sort of said mentioned earlier. So if you don't have good data privacy, data protection processes in place already, where you know there's a lot of rigor around that side of things, and ethical rigor, then for me, I wouldn't venture deeply into AI, because you need to make sure as an organization that you're gonna make the right decisions and implement that technology in a way that benefits people and doesn't do harm. And I think you know, but I think there are organizations that are in a great shape for that, and I think there are some that aren't. And I hope that they will really reflect on themselves before they make serious mistakes. So that's where I begin, is, you know,
Right.
assessing those processes that are in place around information governance, data protection, data governance, and so on and so forth. I think ethics is a huge part, and I think as an organization, if you don't have an ethics committee, if you're going to go into AI in a serious way, or you know, or roll it out at scale, I do think you need some form of auditability and accountability check in place. So the BBC were huge on this, you know, and I worked in children's, and so everything you did went through ethics committees,
Right.
and they were that check and balance, because when you're in it, sometimes you think you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
You get technologically excited about what you might be able to achieve, but you absolutely need that external rigor. So I do think ethics committees, this isn't about slowing innovation down, but you know, it's about making sure that you do it in the right way. I think it starts in, and then if you come down tactically from that side, that sort of governance and oversight, I think then it starts in design. So in architectural design, are we designing this system in a way that decisioning and how decisioning will be made with AI will be, you know, auditable, traceable, and well documented? I think you have to start there. And then as you go through that life cycle of design through to development, that you've got the processes and the checks in place, code reviews, you know, it could be peer reviews, could be automation, the way you test those models then in different scenarios, the way you roll those models out slowly to ensure that the decisioning that they're making or the information that they're presenting is correct and real. Because I think malinformation and misinformation and is going to become a big problem. So that's where I would begin, and that's only
Right.
the beginning, I would say. Yeah, and then we're learning, and so
Yeah.
it's how do you learn in a safe and measured way, because we are learning, and the technology will overtake kind of the speed in which we can learn sometimes, and so we've got to make sure we've got the balance right there.
Amazing. Well, look, thank you so much for chatting to me today. It's been a really insightful session, and really enjoyed finding out more about you and your career and motivations, Mark. So thank you very much again.